brought Ashley Smith to the point where she started to rebel? It's too late to ask her now because it's something she can no longer tell. Why had nobody asked when things started to seem to go so bad? Why had nobody noticed when this young woman had seemed to be so sad? There must have been some explanation for her sudden change in behavior, but unfortunately for Ashley, there would be no chance to find a savior. So one day she chose to throw some apples at the local mailman, and there began an institutional response that would do nothing more than fail men. Thrown into a juvenile incarceration, she was not prepared for their actions. But when they strip-searched her and confined her in solitary, they were not prepared for her reactions. Ashley was 15 years old. She didn't get it. She didn't understand what they were doing. Her adolescent confusion set the stage for all the drama that was ensuing. So there began the insanity that would continue for almost 4 years, where they incarcerated a young girl in an environment that exasperated her fears. No one would properly assess her, and no one would try to understand her. No one would help make sense of her behavior, or that jail was where it would land her. And once they got her into their system, she was left alone and they'd ignore her, and absolutely nothing they did offered any possibility to restore her. Inattention probably caused her bids to seek attention, so solitary confinement only added up to a torturous detention. Solitary was no solution. She needed someone there to guide her, not shoved into an isolation cell where the system chose to hide her. Her behavior only escalated as she slipped farther from sanity, and in a rage she often screamed at them using colorful profanity. Left alone in a cell with only a mattress and a toilet, no matter what they tried to do, she always tried to foil it. 23 hours a day locked up, she was surrounded by 4 walls, and it didn't matter how many times she yelled, they didn't seem to hear her calls. And when she finally couldn't take it, she began to cut herself, because it was clear no one cared. She would have no one but herself. And that was the problem from the beginning. She needed someone to care, rather than share her cell with a camera so that others could just stare. And that's why her cell was empty, because she'd use anything against her, but the lack of anything around her just continued to incense her. And so she spread feces on the camera, covered the window in her door, which resulted in numerous violent entries where they tasered her once more. And every infraction added time to a sentence without end, while all the time she spent locked up was driving her around the bend. When she reached the maximum in solitary, she was transferred once again, where they'd add another 60 days in solitary as part of the bargain. They repeated this 17 times among 9 different institutions, where they're trying to drive her deeper into a state of destitution. So a kind of deadly game ensued of attack and counterattack, while Ashley tried to make connection to make up for her lack. But her jailers played for keeps as they moved in to restrain her. It never dawned on them that they could possibly retrain her. Shocked often by a taser and often sprayed with pepper spray, no one would come and save her, not even if she knelt to pray. Eventually she'd find anything that she could use to hang herself, and at times when she could not take it, she would often bang herself. She would rip up anything, including her mattress or her dress. She would take her feces, spread them on the wall, and make a mess. She would use the strip she cut to wrap around her neck, and she'd choke herself out while thinking, what the heck? If she passed out, then she'd escape beyond the confines of her cell, and for a short time at least she would escape her living hell. She did this so often, she burst all the blood vessels in her face, but still no mental health professional came to take her case. And all the while the cameras rolled, catching every horrible scene, and there was no one there to tell the story of the places she had been. As she reached the age of 18, they transferred her to an adult facility. They didn't care that 3 years in solitary didn't give her an adult ability. How could she possibly mature in this game of catch and cage? The only thing it taught her was how to express her rage, and every time that she expressed it, they took her to the ground and left her one more time in a place empty of all sound. They say solitary causes psychological damage. Eventually you lose it. And that's the way they dealt with Ashley. That's how they chose to use it. The incidents eventually came so often that they were getting kind of tired. They thought if they didn't get it under control, someone would be fired. So they made the decision not to go in unless she clearly had stopped breathing. And if they didn't follow their orders, then their bosses would be seething. So the next time she choked herself out, they made no attempt to save her. Instead, they watched the camera rolling, and there was no help that they gave her. They reported that she wasn't breathing, but the superior said to wait. So 30 minutes later they went in, but it was far too late. Ashley Smith died in a solitary cell while the guards just watched her die. And no matter what the inquest found, there just was no reason why. They thought perhaps the problem was she had an attachment disorder, but that's something that the prison cameras had no way to record her. An attachment disorder comes from a baby with no relationship to another. So when they locked Ashley up in solitary, it was clear no one would love her. So death became the only way to escape her inner pain, because the loneliness that they imposed on her was driving her insane. It's like they took her wound and then they opened it much deeper. Then they built the nightmare around her in the place that they would keep her. There were 150 security incidents that documented the use of force, and Ashley yelled so often her voice would become hoarse. She lost 90 pounds, was blind in one eye, and her hair was falling out. Yet nobody stopped to wonder what her pain was all about. Why did they take a child that was hurt and only hurt her more? Why did no one ask what she was fighting for? How could a system be so cruel as to destroy a human being, to systematically beat her down despite the pain that they were seeing? And in the end she died alone in a solitary cell, and as she took her last breath an eerie silence fell. And somewhere in that silence there was a truth too hard to see, that they'd thrown away a young person and all that she could be. All that's left of Ashley is a name on an inquest report that talks about the lengths to which her captors would resort. But what about the person who was hiding deep inside? The young woman tied in knots that had never been untied. The young person seeking love that she would never find, only to have her life end at the hands of those unkind. She was cast out of society, only to find herself discarded. She'd been locked up in a cell, and her feelings would never be regarded. A casualty of the legal system that doesn't understand how to help our youth, that follows the blind stupidity of a political system that isn't interested in the truth. They want harsher penalties for young people, as if that would ever be an answer, while they ignore the roots or cause as if it were some contagious type of cancer. It's the violence that's contagious, that moves from parents to their kids, and parents are like two dice thrown while society takes their bids, and violence can be silent, like the love that's never given, or the child that's blamed forever and has never been forgiven. Children told they are stupid, and that's all they'll ever be, who walk around with their heads down, so the ground is all they'll see, who have no hope for their future, so they throw their life away. Yet if we ask them what is wrong, there's nothing they will say. They have no reason to trust us. Their own parents have betrayed them, and all the negative messages they've received is part of what delayed them. So they lash out with anger, yet don't understand their actions, and they can continue to get nothing more than our negative reactions until they find themselves like Ashley, screaming out to those who cannot hear, where they're locked away in isolation with nothing but their fear, until the system who stops responding leaves them to the final act. 17 have died since Ashley, and that's the final fact.